welcome to your very own deep dive. You picked Genesis chapter 8. So we're going to unpack all the fascinating details together. It's way more than just, the story of the flood going away. It's like a whole new world starting. We're looking at Genesis chapter 8. And we're using the NIV translation for this.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting about this chapter is how it kind of goes beyond that, that classic flood narrative. It's like it tells us a lot about God's relationship with all of humanity.
Right, like we're picking up right in the action. The flood is going down. There's a very specific timeline here too, right? We get the 150 days for the water to go back. We hear about the ark settling on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month.
I don't think that very specific attention to time is an accident.
Yeah.
Imagine what the world was like right after the flood. I mean, just total chaos, right?
Yeah.
But even with all the destruction, there's this like intentional structure. This like feeling of order.
Like a carefully planned return to normal.
Wow. And then Noah sends out a raven. I thought that was an interesting choice. It's not the first bird you think of when you think of hope, right?
You're right, it's not. The raven in lots of cultures is like connected to the unknown, sometimes even darkness. It's always looking around, flying around. Can't really find a place to land. It could be like a symbol of all that uncertainty that was still around even when the flood was going down.
Then he sends out a dove. A much more, universal symbol of peace, right? And it comes back not with just any leaf, but with an olive branch.
Oh, that detail, the olive branch, that's so important. Like back then in the ancient Near East, they used olive branches when they made peace treaties. So it's not just about finding land, it's about hope, renewal. And even more importantly, God's promise to make peace with humanity.
Yeah, it's like that olive branch becomes like a real-life symbol of that whole new covenant. Speaking of symbolic places, the mountains of Ararat where the ark finally lands, those weren't just any mountains, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Mount Ararat, even way back then, was like this mythical place. It was mysterious, really hard to get to. Some people even thought it was like a gateway to heaven. So the ark ending up there adds another layer of meaning to this whole story of new beginnings and a connection with God. And that idea of a connection to God, it becomes like the most important part when we get to the covenant God makes with Noah. He doesn't make it during the flood, but after. That timing seems important, right?
Yeah, it does. It's like by waiting until after the flood, it makes the promise even stronger.
Right. Think about it. Humanity has just gone through this just unbelievably devastating event. They see everything they knew totally destroyed. And it's at that moment, right as they're stepping onto this new earth, that God reaches out with this covenant.
So it's more than just a promise. It's like reassurance. It's like this huge beacon of hope when everything is awful.
Exactly. And the words of the covenant itself are pretty interesting. God says, He'll never again curse the ground because of humans. But then, and this is where it gets really interesting, he says, every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood.
Wow, yeah, that's a pretty straight-up assessment of human nature, huh? It almost seems kind of contradictory. God knows we mess up, but he still makes this covenant anyway.
Yeah, it really highlights God's grace and mercy. He knows we're not perfect, and yet he's still sticking with us and with this world.
It's like a parent saying to a kid, I know you're going to screw up, but I love you no matter what. I'll always be here. And that unconditional love, it's right there in the promise of the natural world keeping going. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night.
Exactly. And those cycles, they're essential for life to go on, right? They're not just random things. Seed time and harvest mean there's food. The seasons changing brings renewal. Day and night, that's the rhythm of life.
It's like God saying, here's everything you need to thrive. I'm setting things up for a future that's full of potential. But there's something else here that we haven't really talked about yet. This covenant isn't just with Noah. It's with every living thing.
You're right. That's a really important point. It's like a universal promise of care and protection. Makes you wonder, if God is saying He'll protect the earth and everything on it, what does that mean for us?
Definitely makes you think about our responsibility to take care of the planet, doesn't it? If we're part of this covenant, then we got to do our part to keep that promise, to care for the earth. So all these thousands of years later, what does this all mean for us, like practically?
Well, we still depend on those cycles of nature that God promised would keep going. We plant, we harvest, we experience the seasons changing our lives, are totally run by the rhythm of day and night.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected. We're part of something so much bigger than ourselves. This huge plan that's been going up since the very beginning.
Yeah, it really does make you think. This story, this covenant, it goes all the way back to the very beginning of humanity. We've talked about the timeline, the birds, the whole meaning of the covenant. But what does it all say about God?
That's what it all comes down to, right? The God we see in Genesis 8, he's complicated, powerful and caring, fair, but also merciful. He brings the flood, this unbelievable force that destroys everything, but he also makes sure life can continue.
It's interesting, though, that the command to be fruitful and increase in number comes after the flood. It was first given to Adam and Eve back in the garden, and then it's here again, almost like a do-over.
That's a great point. It really shows that this is a brand new start. Humanity gets another chance to fulfill their purpose. But the covenant, it's not just about filling the earth up again. It's about changing the relationship between people and God. Yeah, I totally see the hope in that covenant. But I also feel like a little bit of sadness, maybe even disappointment in God's words. Like, he's seeing the hurt caused by what people did, but he still chooses to love us.
I think that push and pull is a part of the story. It makes us think about how complex God is. He's not just a simple character. He has feelings. He reacts to what humans do. And he offers grace even when we maybe don't deserve it.
So it's not about easy answers or seeing everything as good or bad, is it? It's about seeing the in-between, the gray areas, and finding meaning in all of that.
Exactly. Maybe these stories, these ancient texts, they aren't supposed to give us every answer. Maybe they're more like invitations to explore, to really wrestle with the big questions, to go deeper into the mysteries of faith.
This deep dive has for sure made me see Genesis in a new way. It's amazing how a story from so long ago can still mean something to us today, and even challenge us to look at our own beliefs and values.
It really shows how powerful these stories are, doesn't it? They're like holding up a mirror to us, humans, making us face our own weaknesses and our potential, reminding us that we're part of something way bigger than ourselves.
Well, we've gotten to the end of our exploration of Genesis 8. We found hidden meanings, explored the timeline and the symbolism, and really thought hard about God's covenant with Noah. But like with any good deep dive, we still have even more questions.
We hope this has made you curious, that it's inspired you to keep looking into this ancient text. Remember, faith is all about constantly discovering, and there's always new stuff to learn.
And with that, we'll leave you with one last thing to think about. Why do you think God waited until after the flood to make the covenant with Noah and everyone? What does that say about God?
We encourage you to dig deeper into Genesis, look at different interpretations, and find what speaks to you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.
WBCM.